Communist regime keeps Tibet under heavy control. At the end of 2011, local authorities declared a new policy of requiring Buddhist temples to display portraits and flags of Chinese communist leaders. On Sunday, they renewed their commitments to this policy. They have reportedly sent out over 1 million of these items to villages, homes, and temples across the region.
January 22, 2012, the eve of Chinese New Year. Chinese officials in the Tibet Autonomous Region held a ceremony to unveil a portrait of 4 communist leaders, Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao. They go on to state that they will send these portraits, as well as communist flags, to villages, homes, and temples in the region. It's estimated that 1 million of these items have already been sent. Chair of the Chinese Social Democratic Party, Liu Yingquan, believes the Chinese Communist Party is trying to use its symbols to replace those of traditional Tibetan Buddhism.
Tibetans-in-exile gathered outside the Chinese embassy in India's national capital on Sunday to protest against the Chinese regime's patriotic re-education programs. It is an ongoing attempt by the Chinese regime to control Buddhist practices in Tibet.
On Sunday, young Tibetans in exile demonstrated outside the Chinese embassy in New Delhi. They're protesting against the Chinese regime's patriotic re-education program, an attempt to control Tibetan religious and traditional practices.
It is not the patriotic re-education. It is not helping the Tibetans. It is only crushing the Tibetan soul. And there is a lot of brutality going on in Tibet, and we want to stop it. Please.
Protesters shouted slogans saying, "We want freedom." Many climbed up lampposts, holding anti-Chinese regime banners. Police carried the protesters away and packed them into a bus to China.
They were a part of China. There were no religious rights in Tibet. So all the political prisoners were brutally killed, and there were no rights in Tibet at all. There were no human rights in Tibet. Tibet was never a part of China.
Chinese authorities have recently launched a re-education campaign, restricting religious activities in Kirti Monastery in Sichuan province. The London-based Free Tibet group said 7 monks set themselves on fire in protest, 5 just in the past 2 weeks. After the March self-immolation, Chinese authorities imprisoned 3 Tibetan monks. About 300 were detained for a month.
Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard and the leader of the opposition are rushed away by police as an Aboriginal protest heats up. Gillard and opposition leader Tony Abbott were attending an Australia Day ceremony nearby.
An Aboriginal protest in Canberra outside a restaurant where Prime Minister Julia Gillard and opposition leader Tony Abbott were attending an Australia Day ceremony. As the demonstration escalates, security tells Gillard that she may be in danger.
How do you feel that the situation could deteriorate if you're staying with the team?
Okay, all right. Then what about Mr. Abbott, where you got him?
Right.
Helped him through too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Gillard then relayed the message to Abbott.
I think it would be very easy for that class to discuss crowd look for everyone. So would they like us to go straight away?
They'll let us know, but we'll just... no, I think I'm fine. We'll just put together when we're...
Sure.
Okay, no problem.
What ensues is a panicked escape. The Prime Minister's security team rush her and Abbott into a waiting car, and they make their getaway. One protester picked up a memento from the incident, Gillard's shoe, which slipped off during her escape. Activists were holding a demonstration to celebrate the anniversary of the unofficial Aboriginal tent embassy. Abbott's calls for it to be disbanded prompted the protests.
Bolivian cocoa growers demand that the government should go ahead with the controversial highway plan. The project was delayed last year following protests by Indigenous groups.
Bolivian cocoa growers marched on Thursday for the completion of the controversial road crossing known as the Amazon.
When there's a road here, our people will be better off. Our community will have health care and education.
Construction of the road, which crosses a reserve known as Tibetans, was called off late last year after incessant protest from indigenous people who live in the area. But now the protesters want to overthrow the Tibetans law that prohibits large construction projects in the reserve. We are marching against the Tibetans law and for the development of the indigenous communities. We want the road through the Tibetans that connects San Ignacio de Mojas and Villa Tunari. But when there is a road in the Tibetans, we don't want people to be subjugated, and we don't want people to exploit the Tibetans. Around 800 people from the southern part of the Tibetans Reserve cross through the Bolivian high plains. The marchers, among them women and children, hope to reach La Paz by next week. The controversy is a major challenge for President Evo Morales, pitting him against some in his indigenous base.
So there you go, folks. It's all politics, right? It's all politics. Just shove all the indigenous people and all the other resistors aside, and see Gillard getting run out of that building, and then they show the protesters, and they're all sitting there kind of like passively. I mean, I don't know if they were beating on the windows, but just sitting out there chilling, just kind of, come on, free Tibet. So this is what it is all about. The New World Order, as they call it. It's about exploitation. It's about full control over the individual, and the leadership is just pretty bad. So this is ggnonline.com. That's my website, and then ddarko2012 is my YouTube channel. All the links will be posted in YouTube's video description. Sorry about using all the NDTV ones, but it just happened to be that's what it was. So sink taps, source of infection that killed 3 babies. Sink taps were the source of an infection which killed 3 babies at the Belfast Hospital in Ireland. So sterile water is now being used, and they go on there and say that the health ministry stressed that there was no evidence that the bacterium was in the water system. Well, the first thing you want to check is fluoride, but there's so much other stuff in there. But that's what I'm going to move into next, which is what? Fluoride warnings for infants. So it goes in there, and it basically says that in contrast to recommendations adopted in the 50s, which was pushed by what? Alcoa, which is the aluminum company of America, to offload their toxic waste and put it in your water supply. So it says here, fluoride supplementation is no longer recommended for newborn children. That includes both fluoride in drops and fluoride in drinking water. Not only is fluoride ingesting during infancy unnecessary, it can also be harmful, as suggested by a mounting body of evidence linking fluoride exposure to the first year of life with development of dental fluorosis. Again, because the government really cares about you. And it goes on and it says, a baby drinking fluoridated formula receives the highest dosage of fluoride among all age groups in the population, whereas breastfed infants receive the lowest. And if you're a long-time listener, going back to, say, a year or 2 years ago, I've made this connection before. Aluminum plus fluoride equals Alzheimer's and dementia. Talking about fluoride in the water allows aluminum to be absorbed into the brain more easily. And that is what? That's the aerosols that they're spraying, or some people call them chemtrails. That's aluminum oxide, along with many other things, like the Morgellons fibers, but aluminum is one of them. And that's so what? That you can forget what exactly is going on. Fluoride enhances the bioavailability of aluminum, allowing it to cross the blood-brain barrier easier, thus making it more toxic. And you can go in there and check out the following study from 1998. And they actually talk about it. Chemtrails contain the oxides of metals. According to the geoengineering patent, these substances supposedly sprayed from our atmosphere or inner atmosphere for beneficial climate manipulation. And it's all proposal. It's not actually happening, so don't worry about it. So we all have seen this. I've seen it because I was a grocery stocker, and it's just really hard to see that. But, people can do it voluntarily. Like I said, nursery purified water, minerals added for taste. So one of the minerals or vitamins is vitamin F, which is fluoride. Is it safe for my child? Well, they go on and say, yes, the American Dental Association continues to support water fluoridation at the optimal range for the general public. According to the ADA, baby formula can be mixed with water that is fluoride-free or contains low levels of fluoride. This type of nursery water is purified water, steam distilled for purity, which assures you it is safe, pure, and clean. So in New Hampshire, they're trying to ban fluoride. It goes on here, says an act relative to the introduction of fluoride and herbicides into the drinking water. And it goes on here, says an act basically no fluoride, no any chemical containing fluoride shall be introduced into the public water supply. And this is actually a bill for the 2012 session, HB 1529, so good for them. Going on here, we have brain-eating bacteria in neti pot. Water may have killed 2 people. And doctors recommend what? Oh, using distilled water or saline solution rather than tap. What happens when the light goes on? Nothing. So it goes on and says that this couple moved into an apartment 8 years ago, said it was nice and new and great rent. And it goes on here and it says that they got their wish a few years ago, but it goes on and says, a person who has arthritis, my feet are size 10, then they swelled up to size 14. He developed gaping sores on his legs and ankles and ballooned, and his toenails rotted off. They're talking about ELFs here, guys. And Wi-Fi and cell towers. I lost my ankles. I had skinny ankles before. And she goes on her and revealed swelling, which is visible. And it goes, it doesn't look right, and you don't want to see her toenails. And then what? He went on the internet. Ooh, the internet full of conspiracy theories, right? And found a clip on dancing cows. And it went on there and it said that when dairy cows live in barns, when they have a strong electromagnetic field underfoot, they are unable to stand still. In time, their hooves rot off and their joints swell and they develop weeping sores. They used a meter to test the EMF radiation. And it says here, when EMF levels are higher than 3 Gauss, biological damage can occur at the level beneath the loader's bed, registered at 100. So as any logical person with some common sense and a little time and willpower, what did he do? He took it to the board. That's right. And this is what his reply was. The board takes the position that electromagnetic fields do not cause any medical ill effects. The board is not aware of any heavy wiring near your apartment. He went to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, who ducked the problem. Then he got a reply from the Ministry of Health. Unfortunately, your problems lie outside our jurisdiction. So this individual brought Dr. Havas. He said he's a scientist from Trent University, world's leading experts in electromagnetism, and he went on to say, I don't know why they are ill, but he goes in there and he says, I do know that there's an abnormally strong electromagnetic field running through the apartment. He said it is powerful enough to turn on a light, and that is simply wrong. From November 5th, 2010, I don't know if you guys remember this, says cell tower radiation harmful to humans, says study, multiple radio signals enough to cause physical, psychological problems. Scientists studying this or researching this said or found similar to Cold War embassy bombardment. The results are the conditions are similar to the intentional irradiation of employees at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow starting in 1953. He says we're getting a mirror effect, which basically says that in signaling characteristics in long-term low-level chronic exposure during as that early microwave sickness paper from the Moscow Embassy. Some long-term effects of that radiation exposure from Johns Hopkins University is eczema, which is a skin condition, psoriasis, allergic and inflammatory reactions, neurological and reproductive problems, tumors, and mood disorders such as depression, irritability, and lack of concentration. So one thing that you can do, just throw it out there, is if you have a bed with springs, all those coil springs, you might want to switch to something else like a air mattress or whatnot. Also, a lot of people have heavy metals, heavy metals in their body, so you can do the distilled water, do whatever you have to do, detox to get all those metals out of your body. So study finds no link between cell phone use and cancer. This is from a Danish study, October 2011, but there's studies that say that there are. So the government will back it. FDA panelists had ties to Bayer, that's right. Said the benefits of 4 popular AG birth control pills outweigh the blood clot risk. Went ahead and passed it. So then what do we have? Cell phones, radiation in your child's health. They're growing up in a sea of radio frequency radiation. They actually call it smog. That's the technical term. They said never existed in human history. It's a 2-wave microwave radio with intermittent destabilizing pulses that disrupt DNA and weakens the brain's protective barrier, releases highly reactive and damaging free radicals. The bone marrow of a child's head absorbs 10 times more radiation than one adult, while those of the infants and toddlers will absorb even more. 2011, the WHO released a report saying that cell phone radiation may have carcinogenic effects on humans. Remember, I just covered this to tie it in. This is a wireless router for your brain, and it can shoot lasers that we can use to alter behavior, model diseases, spread diseases, and maybe even one day deliver drugs, i.e. force medicate. I'll post a link for these Q links, basically an ELF microwave bombardment protection. And there is a website somewhere in Britain where it's based out of that you can have a little protector over your cell phone as well. But the nanoparticles, can't really do much about that, unfortunately. This is GGN. Thank you.